I wanted to give this a few days, or at least a couple weeks, before I gave basically my overall thoughts on the new Aether Raids changes, and I think I can safely say this brand new change kind of crippled Aether Raid's defense as a whole. And for those who aren't aware, the brand new update came with several new features to Aether Raids, most notably the extra slot that we can get into Aether Raid's offense and Aether Raid's defense, as well as the kamikaze strategy, but I'll get into that in a bit. What I really want to focus on is the potential and kind of the downfall, or not downfall, but how a lot of units are going to be struggling now. So as it stands right now, Astra season is the only season that can get an additional slot. And assuming Intelligent Systems wants to keep up with these new Mythics and not use the older ones, we're only going to get these every 2 months. And there's no guarantee that the next one we get in, I believe, January, if I'm not mistaken, is going to be Anima. It might be light or it might be dark. We have no information on that whatsoever. But as it stands, we kind of got a 6v6 on one season, and given how light season is already kind of a joke, Aether Raid's offense just became way too easy. So definitely one of the first things I definitely wanted to talk about was the open slot, because this opens so many options for units that it's ridiculous. One thing to note is that because there is an open slot, this doesn't affect score. So you can run, let's say, bonus Reagan, this season at least, with 3 Altina. And every unit that's blessed can get 12 additional attack. It's pretty wild. Yeah, I would say on that note, we can at least go into one of the first archetypes that really benefit from this, and that's the Vantage Units. Mostly, they're mostly dual phase brave, or at the very least enemy phase brave, but it genuinely depends on the unit overall. Because if they don't have the attack stat, then it's really not going to matter as much compared to units like Laszlo, Keaton, Young Sheeta. It's ridiculous to think about, considering we can use triple to quad mythics. We can not only stack an exuberant amount of attack, we don't lose score. We meet max score that way. So you can end up with units like base 78 attack Laszlo, 81 attack Sheeta, give her all sorts of skills, give Keaton all sorts of skills. It's ridiculous. I don't believe that there are going to be enough units, if any at all, that can really take the hits. That can take at least 2 hits. At least if we were to go by Laszlo, base 78 attack. Of course, that's with triple Altina and 1 Reagan with summoner support. And that's it's very possible. It's not something that's like, oh, it's a meme because her, you can stack all this stuff with like 5 mythics and like yada yada. No, this is a real thing that can happen. And units I can honestly think of that are going to be kind of crippled, at least on Aether Raid's defense. You got your Ellywoods, you got your Brave Roys, you got Sigurd. You have any unit that can frontline and take hits is probably what's going to struggle a lot. You even have Kemp, you have maybe Dusel. I might have to test that more, but of course, given that it's also a red versus blue sort of thing, I don't know how well they're going to do overall in that matchup. You also have like Ninja Levitain, for instance. She's basically green Altina, but she can be blessed. It's not something that I don't think there are going to be a lot of counters for this at the moment. Of course, you can run like Hardy Bearing. you can use your typical Ophelia build with stuff like Area of Effect special with Hardy Bearing, or so you would think, because this is honestly going to be a bigger struggle too. Something I mentioned earlier that we could just bring up right now is the fact that you can kamikaze any unit, and basically to summarize, you can smite in any unit, you can attack, you can pulse smoke, you can panic smoke, you can do whatever you want, and if they die, then it doesn't compromise your score. It's completely viable, which means most units that run Area of Effects, instant specials, are going to struggle. They can't get off their special, you sweep them, they're done. Even with Hardy Bearing, they're probably not going to have the attack, and if they do have enough attack, they can easily get you into the Vantage range too. It's ridiculous. You could always do Slaying Times Pulse with basically a lot of units, but I don't think it's going to make a dent. Especially with all the HP inflation. With 4 Mythics, I highly doubt it's going to make much of a difference. And then we have our Galeforcers, who I think benefit almost as well as Vantage units, but given like how like different their playstyles are, I don't think it's I don't think it's fair to say one's better than the other. You can run 3 Plumeria and a Reagan, and then an additional support. With 4 Dancers now, it's honestly it's entirely possible just to turn 1 teams. It's kind of ridiculous. I got sent this image too earlier this morning. I got swept so bad on my team. It's ridiculous. But no, because Plumeria doesn't take up any slots because she's a Mythic Dancer. Your score isn't affected. You can run, honestly, what you could honestly do too is you can run like an Olivia, you can run a Raphael, you can run anything for like Infantry Pulse. You want to get that off really quick, you can run a you can run another Flying Dancer like for like New Year Azura with Guard Bearing. So even if somehow she gets attacked, she's going to be fine in the enemy phase. There are so many options now for Dancers that you can just run with any Galeforce unit, and it's honestly ridiculous. I do think regardless of how buffed Galeforce units are now, the Byleths are probably still the best Galeforcers in the game, solely due on the fact that they can't be affected by guard skills. And that's actually really, really good when it comes to Galeforcing, because there's nothing that compromises you from actually making your Galeforce checks other than just the Heavy Blade or the Speed check. And their stats are already good enough to where it's not going to be an issue. Especially with 4 Mythics now, it's kind of ridiculous. On another note too, you can also just run Spurn tanks and tanks in general. Spurn tanks, they can stack more speed, obviously, they can get more stats. They're basically going to be stat pulling for the most part, and it's going to be even harder to take them out. Like, you can look at Deke, for example. Slaying Axe gets more stats from his axe, very powerful. And then, not only that, because you have a free slot, you can easily just run a bonus, let's say Flame, for example. I think Flame is going to be the prime example in this video. With the free slot, you can use Flame, which means a lot of infantry units can run other B skills, which is actually massive when you consider the fact that a lot of the time, these units are like, they are kind of forced to run like damage reduction skills, which means they can get hit by Fire Sweep. Because of the free B they have now, they can easily run Null Counter Disrupt, Null Follow-Up. So Lucina, for example, while she can prevent the follow-ups, one of the things she still struggles with is Impact, because regardless of her speed, she has no method of preventing that outside of Null Follow-Up. And if you use Null Follow-Up, then she's just not going to have damage reduction, which means she could just get hit by any special and just lose. But now, because she has Flame as an extra support, she can run Null Counter Disrupt or Null Follow-Up, which means she will always double regardless. She can bypass impacts. Same thing with Deke. You can give up a Spurn damage reduction, any damage reduction skill. Run Null Counter Disrupt, Null Follow-Up, you're always doubling. It's a non-issue now. We also have Noe, who's honestly just one of the best dragons in the game we have right now, because her refine is actually ridiculous. I know, like, there's a point of contention with the fact that she still has the, like, base Lightning Breath penalty. It's really a non-issue, considering the fact that she can still get support from stuff like Infantry Rush. She can run, like, 4 cooldown Soul, 3 cooldown Noontime. It's really not that bad. She's going to double. No Counter Disrupt Noe. You can speed stack her because of the free A. But you can still Thracia her. You can still use Thracia her, so that's not going to be too much of an issue on Astra. But you can still stack enough to the point where she can survive a hit. The free slot just opens up a lot for infantry units, and it doesn't even have to be like Lucina, Deke, Noah. It could be a lot of units with good enough speed or good attack. Like any unit that has the stats for it can just run a better B skill. Or not even a better B skill, they just have an additional one. But then you also have your armors, and there's nothing really to say on them because they're just gonna stat alt too. You get triple quad mythics. You stack their defense, their attack. You can even like stack speed if you really want to because you can use triple plumeria. That's not really... It's something you can honestly do. Like I have Arden down there more as a meme, but it's entirely possible. I wouldn't recommend it, considering they're just better armors you can run, but it's just entirely possible. You can just keep stacking stats, they're bulky. Armors also have Slick now, which is one of the best B skills they have in the game because they can't get penalized. The ones with a free A, like Kanagas, can also run other skills, like Mirror Stance 3, so they can't even charge their specials. There's so many options now with just, I would say most of the Aether Raid's offense units. But out of all the Aether Raid's offense units, there are only going to be a specific few that benefit the most. Like, especially, like, going back to the Vantage units, you can go with Laszlo, Keaton, Cheetah. Those are going to be the ones that benefit the most in the enemy phase when it comes to Vantage. When it comes to Spurn tanking, it's obviously going to be your faster units. You could go Marita, Deke, Lucina now. And then even for just armors in general. But because of all this stat stacking, we get to the point where Aether Raid's defense-oriented units completely struggle now. I was doing some calculations, and I may be a bit off, so I'm gonna round it. It's just around this area. Units that can stack, already come with a lot of speed. They get stack speed. They don't have to worry about additional A's. You got Legendary Legendary Celica, Selena, Young Merrick, Summer Byleth. They can stack speed in these, if you were talking Max Merge, let's just say Duma and Leaf buffed, even though Leaf really isn't the best one, we'll just say for the sake of argument. It's very easy to just stack speed. In this example, I have Laszlo, and it's oh, Laszlo, ooh, yay. But no. I chose Laszlo in this example because he has a super boon in speed, which gets him to 30, which is still fairly good when it comes to pretty much light. But now that you have Astra, I can run triple Plumeria, which gives you 12 additional speed. One could be running Sabotage speed, which means the foes end up with 7 less speed. I can run Speed Rest solo on his S, Distant Counter, and I can just use Brave Lucina. Because, no, I just have that additional slot that doesn't compromise score. So, considering all that, it's going to be even harder for Aether Raid's defense units to just make speed checks now. There's still going to be units that, outspeed a lot of units like crazy. 66 speed Selena really isn't something to sleep on, but I do think the barrier to break that is probably around 30 speed. Of course, you go Summoner support, etc, etc. If they have at least 30 or above 30 speed, I don't think it's going to be an issue at all, especially just on Astra right now. And then, I didn't even mention the fact that you can just dance with Plumeria, you can debuff them even more, you can get more stats on you can run drives on Plumeria too if you really want to do that. It's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous at this point. I even have to wonder if Eliwood might struggle, but I feel like that's just more of a stretch considering he gets steady impact or whatever it was called. He can run a lot of stuff basically. I don't think he's going to struggle as much. But also, given the fact that he isn't solely reliant on Aether Raid's defense, he can still be ran on Aether Raid's offense. He's going to be just fine. But outside of Eliwood, who just can rely on just visible speed, you have units like Sigurd, Micaiah, any unit that can get an auto follow-up, honestly, they're going to be struggling too against infantry, especially if you run like flame support. You can run null follow-up. It's, again, just completely viable. Micaiah doesn't necessarily have the best speed, especially when you consider her role on Aether Raid's defense. It's going to be way harder for her to just double in general. You also have Sigurd, so something I can definitely praise Sigurd over Seliph for is the fact that his stats are just more appealing when it comes to his weapon, especially if you're running an Aether Raid's defense. I think Seliph definitely benefits more on offense, considering he can run null follow-up and all sorts of other skills, but when it comes to Sigurd, just when it comes to Aether Raid's defense, I think Sigurd just has a way bigger edge. He's kind of like Eliwood in the sense, where he could just become a massive stat ball, he gets a guaranteed follow-up, but the problem now is going to be the fact that he's also going to have to rely on speed. And given that his weapon doesn't give any speed, he's going to have to run maybe stuff like Aether Raid's defense attack speed 3, lull attack speed, and if you're going to be Gale Forcing with him, you're going to need Heavy Blade. It's going to be hard for units that rely on guaranteed follow-ups. Sigurd might be able to get away with it because, assuming Max Merge, Duma Leaf, he can reach fairly good speed. But I don't know if it's going to be enough, especially if you're like, if you get Sabotage Speed by a Plumeria. It's going to be hard now. I would say the only units right now that aren't affected on Aether Raid's defense are just the Dancers, because they just do what they're intended. They don't need to like need ace checks, they just have to dance. That being said, you can now run 2 Bride Fiorns, and it's still perfectly viable. You don't lose score, you can isolate all these Dancers, and then you could just run rampant. It's ridiculous. And I keep saying ridiculous because it's ridiculous. The last thing I did want to bring up too is the fact that we do have an extra slot in Aether Raid's defense, but I also don't know if that's going to make things better or worse overall, considering that you have 2 rows and you can only go 2 spaces for each unit. You're basically forced to run 4 columns, on top of the fact that while you may have spacing issues now, it may just be as easier to bait out. And I think because of 7 slots, it's really going to benefit either just armor stat balls if you want to do like a bunch of wards, or calves because they have the range. But I don't know if the 7th slot, when it unlocks, is going to make things better, or at least more manageable. But we'll have to wait and see because we don't know anything right now, and I can't actually test that, which kind of sucks. And of course, if you really just want to, like, if you don't have any roles for your other mythics, like if you're running Reagan, Altina, Plumeria, you can honestly just turn them into like Shrine Soakers. You can make Altina a Dark Shrine Soaker and a Sabotage unit, which is totally fine. You could give her more drives, Katamatsu, and call it a day with her. And then Reagan, she could just be a Bright Shrine Soaker, which is fairly easy to do considering her stat line. You could give her like Life and Death 3, Life and Death 4, anything that raises attack speed, really. Or if you want to, you can run her as a hit and run bot with Pulse Smoke, which is also totally possible. I think overall, Aether Raid's defense is kind of screwed at the moment. You can still win as long as you, like, if the opponent forfeits, if they lose 2 units, but I think it's going to be way harder now than it's ever been. Not that it's dead by any means, but it's not looking the best. But that's at least how I view it. I could be wrong, I could be right, I don't know. But I would really just keep all this in mind when approaching Aether Raids now, because this really changes everything.